All right, and we are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. And for the third part of the show, we are going to talk about some comments made by Myles Garrett, praising Christian McCaffrey, believing that he should be the number one player on the NFL's top 100. So I just wanted to get into what he had to say, and I'll give you my thoughts on it. So he said, number one for me, taking myself out of the equation. So Myles Garrett, Myles Garrett being biased would say he's the number one player, but yeah, so he took himself out of the equation. He'd say Christian McCaffrey. Talked about how McCaffrey breaks through tackles. He runs hard every single time. Couldn't really stop the guy. Running the ball, receiving the ball, the guy can throw as well. He has dedicated himself to each facet of the game, making sure he's as valuable to his team as possible. He's like a Renaissance man. Let's see. Did he have anything? I think that's the only quote that was in the article. I thought there was another one, but um, yeah, and then supposedly like threw some jabs because, the Browns, they did win against the 49ers last season, which was the 49ers' first loss of the year. Now, if Jake Moody would have just made his kicks, then we would have had a different conversation. But the Browns defense did play very well. They forced, Brock Purdy to throw some interceptions. So, McCaffrey also got banged up in that game. There was a few guys that got banged up in that game. Debo, I think, got banged up, and Trent Williams also. Um, and yeah, that was without Deshaun Watson and Nick Chubb. The Browns won that, so give them credit for it. But also they had a very good defense last year, so that played a huge role, like I said. But yeah, so in terms of now what he was saying, he thinks Christian McCaffrey is the number one player in the NFL, and depending on who you ask, the answer is going to be different. Because for me, I would probably say, which, a lot of people would probably say the same thing. Not everybody. Again, depends on who you ask. I'd probably say Patrick Mahomes is the number one player. Um, but it also depends on, like, what you're talking about. Like, because, there's also, like, the guy that's won a lot of championships. But Patrick Mahomes, he's the best quarterback in the NFL. And he could do a lot. And I just think when you talk about, like, the top 100 or, like, even the MVP award, a lot of times, yeah, the quarterback's going to be the number one guy. Which is to an extent it's unfair because guys like Christian McCaffrey, listen, I think it should have been either Christian McCaffrey or Tyreek Hill as the MVP last year. And no offense to Lamar Jackson, but I think if there was a year to give a non-quarterback the MVP, it was last year. But that was not the case. And like I said, it depends on who you ask, who you think is the best player in the NFL. Because if you're a defensive guy, you might say it's a defensive player. You might say it's T.J. Watt. You might say it's Myles Garrett. If you're a big quarterback person, which I would probably put myself in that category, you probably think it's Patrick Mahomes. Might say it's Lamar Jackson. But if you could be like Myles Garrett and say it's Christian McCaffrey because Christian McCaffrey does do a lot at his position. He could, like you said, run through the tackles, and catch passes out of the backfield at an elite level, and yeah, could throw a little bit because we saw him throw a little bit in the NFC Championship game a couple of years ago. But yeah, Christian McCaffrey is definitely, at least a top 3 player in the NFL. Depending on, again, if you're a big quarterback guy, whatever it is, Christian McCaffrey, regardless, is one of the top players in the NFL. And actually, recently, because I know there's been a lot of debate on Pete Prisco's top 100 players. And first of all, again, I'm not someone that likes to do rankings because, and I don't know how people do top 100s. Like, yeah, top 10s are hard. Top 100, that is just, listen, I appreciate the dedication, but yeah, it's just, I don't know how you do it. But everybody's lists are going to be different. And you're not going to have, like, don't expect people to agree with your rankings. Because everybody's going to have a different opinion. Now, he put Patrick Mahomes as the number one player. And I wanted to see where he put McCaffrey. So Mahomes was at 1. Myles Garrett was at 2. Trent Williams was at 3. Yeah, Christian McCaffrey's all the way at number 8 on his list. Justin Jefferson is at 7. Josh Allen 6. TJ Watt 5. Tyreek Hill 4. Trent Williams 3. Myles Garrett 2. Patrick Mahomes 1. So yeah, McCaffrey's all the way down at 8. And I said, I think you should put him in the top 3. And I probably would. Yeah, but that's, I mean, there's a lot we could go over with that list because there was a lot of people that were complaining about that list. But yeah, I mean, I think he's a top 3 player. Because of what he's able to do. I mean, he's the best running back at his position. So I think, you know, you got to factor that in. Yeah, I would put him in my top 3. But, you know, I feel like I'm more of an offensive guy. I know I said a quarterback before, but I feel like, yeah, because I'm just more of an offensive guy than I am a defensive guy. But, because that's kind of the era that I've grown up in, you know. I mean, I got to see the Seahawks, you know, dominate against the Broncos, and, you know, the Broncos defense dominated against Cam Newton when he won the MVP. But yeah, I think I'm more of an offensive guy. So, but yeah, I mean, the top 100 that comes out that NFL Network does every year, because I think that's what he's talking about. Because I thought it was about Pete Prisco's list, but no, it's when they do that top 100, and you know that list it's kind of a popularity contest with that one, because there were years where there were guys that like didn't play that much, and they still ended up making the list. Like Peyton Manning made the list one year, and that was the year that he was hurt. Now, I understand why he was on the list, because the Colts were so bad, and that just goes to show you like how much Peyton Manning meant to them, and that's why you should be in the top 100, so I get that. But, you know, it should be guys that played during the year. And, you know, sometimes, you know, the MVP might not be the number one guy. Like 2016, like Matt Ryan won MVP. He wasn't number 1 on the list. You know, there were years, I think, you know, the years that Aaron Rodgers won MVP, I don't think he was number 1. You know, and so that's kind of how they do that, it's kind of a popularity contest. You know, and we got a comment in the chat. Spencer Brookman said Brady's better. Yeah, I'm not gonna get into that. But yeah, you're not gonna get an argument out of me. Not going to get an argument out of me for that. But I was just giving that as an example. Like the years that, you know, certain players won MVP, they weren't number 1 on those lists. So, but yeah, that's just my thoughts on that. But, you know, with Christian McCaffrey, though, I mean, I got a new deal now with the Niners, of course. We did talk about that recently. And, you know, he's been able to stay relatively healthy with the Niners, because, you know, the last, you know, few years in Carolina, you know, he was dealing with injuries. I mean, yeah, it still had some injuries last year, but he was able to play through them. But yeah, I mean, he's in a very good situation with the Niners. I mean, he's still got some good years left, and you know, he's going to be a big part of this team, you know, for a while, and they're hoping that they can get that championship that I've said it a bunch of times that this group does deserve to get. And, you know, this year it's going to be tougher. But, I think they still got the pieces in place that they can go out there and do it. We also got to see what happens with Brandon Ayuk, because, you know, things right now aren't looking too great. But if they can get a deal done, you know, they're going to be ready to roll. And I also talked about how, you know, people are looking at Brock Purdy and saying he looks great. Going to go out there and maybe have a better season. Who knows? But, yeah, I mean, the 49ers are a very good team. And Christian McCaffrey, the 49ers bringing him in, that was such a great move. Such an impactful move. Because, I mean, they're a team that has run the football well in the past. I mean, we saw what Raheem Mostert did with them. And, Elijah Mitchell, his rookie season, did well, even though he got hurt. But Christian McCaffrey just completely elevates that backfield because, like Myles Garrett said, do so much. And, yeah, I mean, he's going to continue to be a big part of this offense, and I expect another great year out of him. So, but let me know what you guys think about what Myles Garrett had to say. Where would you rank Christian McCaffrey amongst the players in the NFL? Because, I mean, like I said, I'm more of a quarterback guy, offensive guy, so I'd probably, I would side with Pete Prisco and probably put Patrick Mahomes at number one. But I think Christian McCaffrey, he's definitely, at least top 5 player in the NFL. I know I said top 3, but, he's 100% up there. So, that's my thoughts on that. Again, let me know what you guys think. Once again, about what Myles Garrett had to say. Where'd you rank McCaffrey? So, we are going to take our next break. And then when we come back, we will discuss what Lane Johnson had to say. Talk about the Eagles. About the Eagles' upcoming season. And I'll give you my thoughts on it when we return from our next break. So, with that being said, stick around. And we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast.